Hello, my name is Sam Felton and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. With me today after kind of a couple of weeks break, again, I know we've been a bit on and off at the moment, but we're going to be starting up again in terms of a steady flow. But with me today, without further ado, is Director of Performance Nutrition at Precision Nutrition, is Brian St. Pierre. How you doing, Brian?
Good, Sam. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Not a problem, not a problem. It's fantastic to have you on because I've followed precision nutrition kind of ever since I came into the fitness industry. And for anyone out there that doesn't know what precision nutrition are, they're probably the biggest educator on nutrition within the fitness industry, I'd say. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd probably say that. That sounds, to
I
my knowledge anyway.
I don't know of any official statistics there,
Right.
but I'm guessing it's probably true. And yeah, you guys have always got, we'll go with it. And you guys have always got a really nice, down-to-earth, balanced point of view when it kind of comes to all things nutrition, hence the name Precision Nutrition. And today we're going to be talking about kind of something very specific, which is nutrient timing dead? Which is very, very specific, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it. But before we get into all of that, how exactly did you get into the health and fitness industry yourself, and how did you get into the position that you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So getting into the field in the first place, I probably credit to like my dad. When I was in high school, he had worked out when I was a little kid. Like I used to go to the gym with him. I was a fit guy, and then he had 3 kids and owned two businesses, and really worked hard. And he gained weight over time. Right? I think he gained probably 20-30 pounds. Nothing extraordinary, but it bothered him. So when I was probably in like 8th grade, he decided that enough was enough, and he was going to change his lifestyle. And my parents were very discreet about it. They didn't try to like overtly talk about dieting or weight or anything like that, but I was old enough to kind of notice the changes in our dietary approach at home. And yeah, he lost all 25-30 pounds within probably like a year, and he's kept it off ever since. So I don't know, almost 20 years now. And so he just got more interested in fitness and nutrition, and it just piqued my interest, right? And just not even in terms of just physique. I mean, I was 12 years old. I wasn't all that concerned about physique per se, but I was an athlete and I was competitive. And so I was more interested in fueling for performance, and then physique kind of came in later. But that kind of really got me on the path. And eventually in school, I was an engineering major in college for 3 years, mistakenly an engineering major for 3 years. But I spent more time reading JohnBerardi.com and the bodybuilding.com forums. Like Alan Aragon was on there, and I just like lived and breathed and ate everything that they wrote about and talked about. And eventually, after talks from many friends, was convinced to switch to nutrition, and kind of got in there ever since. In terms of how I got where I am in the field now, part of it was just right place, right time. I was playing rugby in college, and I was a decent rugby player. And the way it works, at least in the U.S., is if you want to play men's league rugby, they'll help you get a job. They basically try to like recruit you to play on their team, and they'll kind of hook you up with a job or start an internship or something. And so I was talking to a team down in Massachusetts, and they were like, "Oh, we can hook you up with an internship at Mike Boyle's." And I was like, "Hell yeah, sign me up."
Awesome.
And so when I talked to their contact, he's like, "Look, I can't just give you an internship at Mike Boyle's. That's not how it works." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "But it's like I would highly suggest, do you know who Eric Cressey is?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good strength coach." Like, yeah, I'd contact him, just to see if you can observe. And so I shoot Eric an email, and Eric was from Maine, just like myself, so he was interested in having me come down and observe. And so I ended up going down to Cressey Performance right after they launched, just to observe for a day. They offered me an internship, kind of just on the spot, unpaid, of course. Which I took. My parents thought I was nuts. I had a college degree. I'm taking an unpaid internship. And then lo and behold, I was the first intern. I became their first employee. and I just worked my ass off to learn as much as I could about training and nutrition. Eventually, after 3 years there, I went back to school for my master's and to become an RD, planning to open up my own facility in Maine, like a miniature version of Cressey Performance. And I got an email from Precision Nutrition. I've been on their newsletter for years and years and years, that they were looking to hire. And I was like, well, if I'm going to work for anybody else in the field, John Berardi's probably a good option, right? He's kind of one of the people that really got me interested in the field in the first place. And so went with it. I applied, and I was lucky enough to be hired, and here I am today.
Kind of fascinating to see how kind of from one job lead where you want to be in a way, essentially. Into you go, well, is nutrient dead? And for those that what the term nutrient timing is, what is nutrient timing to begin with?
So you were a little broken up there, but to describe what nutrient timing is, I would say in the simplest terms, nutrient timing is like the specific consumption of specific nutrients at specific times. So generally speaking, for the most part, people are probably talking about like protein and carbs before, during, after, like around your workouts. But it could be extrapolated to how often you eat, right? Do you eat your majority of your calories and carbs at breakfast versus at night? Do you do intermittent fasting and skip breakfast? Because timing is all a part of that, right? Like the nutrient timing window, and in like Martin Berkham's version of intermittent fasting, lean gains, right? They just shrink your eating window. And so that's essentially a function of your timing your nutrients, not necessarily around your workouts per se, but around your entire structure of your day. So it's based on when you're eating, but mostly people are talking about workout nutrition.
Specific per out, and that's a lot. So for you, is nutrient in there, and it always will?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I lost some of the audio there. Can you repeat that question?
Okay, sorry. So
no, there we go.
Oh, there you go. Am I back?
You're back. You're good.
Cool. So for you, is nutrient timing completely dead and it doesn't matter, or has it always been there and it always will be there?
Absolutely. Of course it's not dead, right? It's just
no.
It's about you. It's a tool. It's not necessarily the be all end all, right? It was a concept that had gotten taken, as usual in the fitness industry, too far, right? It's simply one tool in your toolbox of nutrition. It should not be the entire foundation of most people's approach. But nutrient timing, depending on your needs and your goals, can be incredibly important, right? You could even go as far as like sipping water during an athletic event is technically nutrient timing, right? You're consuming water intentionally during your event to help you stay hydrated. Water is a nutrient. So, you can take it to that extreme in the discussion. So absolutely, is it relevant? But for most people, most of the time, is the exact timing of your carbohydrates the critical component of your results? Like, absolutely not, right? We know total intake drastically outweighs timing in terms of your progress markers. So you could have the best nutrient timing in the world, right? You have some protein and carbohydrates, like some fast digesting ones immediately before and during training, and you have maybe some slower ones or even fast ones immediately after training. But if you don't consume enough total calories, you're not going to gain the muscle you could gain, even if you neglected timing but consumed an appropriate amount of total calories to meet your muscle gaining needs. So far and away, total intake is more important. But as you get to the more extreme ends of progress, people who want to get to, say, single-digit body fat, or the extreme ends of muscle gain, then nutrient timing becomes more and more important. It's on more of a continuum than a black and white, like yes or no question.
Yeah, absolutely. Then in terms of actual sports performance, for instance, say with kind of, elite athletes, obviously nutrient timing kind of is important within that as well. So how do you feel about it? Do you think nutrient timing is possibly more important when it comes to performance rather than kind of, muscle gains and things like that?
Sure. Depending on the sport.
Yeah.
But for example, when you're talking about elite athletes, small edges can make the difference between winning and losing, right? I mean, the difference between a great player and a mediocre player at the professional level is actually not that far, relatively speaking. That mediocre player would be an absolute stud in any other league in the world, right? So the difference between that level is minute. And so any little competitive edge you can offer can help. So in terms of, like your average client, let's say they work a 9 to 5 job, they have kids, they want to make progress, things that adjust their progress markers by 2 to 3% are more or less irrelevant, right? The efforts to get that level of return is not worth it. But for a pro athlete whose job depends on performance markers and body composition markers much more so than my job, right, in terms of that kind of thing, or most of us, that 2 to 3% can make all the difference. So making sure they're consuming fluids during games and practices, especially if they're doing games, maybe something with some carbohydrates and electrolytes, just to ensure they have every possible bit of energy and hydration status maintained so that they're at their peak in the fourth quarter like they were in the first quarter, or the second half like the first half, whatever the sport might be, or the third period versus the first period. So absolutely at that end of the spectrum, and that's why I said it's a continuum, right? It's a spectrum. At the highest end of sport, or the highest end of physique competition, or just physique goals, even if you don't compete, it matters more. If you just have more moderate goals, someone like myself who just likes to be fit and healthy, but I'm not looking to be 6% body fat per se, it's far less important.
Absolutely. And so what's your overall guidance for that person that has moderate goals for nutrient timing itself, kind of in and around workouts? Say, you got somebody that's, say, 20 pounds overweight. They've hired a personal trainer to do 3 training sessions a week, doing strength training and a little bit of interval stuff as well. What would your nutrient timing advice be on that plan?
Sure. With a somewhat traditional workout scheme like that, what we really recommend is to get in a good quality meal about an hour or two before and an hour or two after your training sessions. I mean, some really recent research done by Alan Aragon and others really looked at protein timing and nutrient timing around workouts, chronically versus acutely, all these variables. And what they really found was, total intake is most important, but it's still a good idea to bookend your sessions with some quality protein and carbohydrate meals. But that doesn't mean you have to, the minute you finish your set, slug down a protein shake or race home and have something. That anabolic window of opportunity, as it's always been called, which we used to think was like within 30 minutes after a workout, it's actually much bigger than we originally thought, especially if you've eaten within a couple hours before your workout. Because it takes 4 to 5 hours for a good sized meal like that to kind of get through your system, get into your bloodstream, and things return to baseline. So by the time you get to 4 hours after that meal, your numbers are just coming back down. So if you consume another meal then, that's about 4 hours after your other one, you're going to start getting another infusion of amino acids and glucose into your bloodstream, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, all those good things are going to help you recover. But it doesn't need to be like this super fast digesting, carbohydrate or protein. So what we really recommend is for males as a starting point to have 2 palms of protein, 2 fists of vegetables, 2 cupped handfuls of carbs, either be fruit or like a starch, and 2 thumbs of healthy fats, an hour or two before and an hour or two after. And for women, it's about 1 serving everything. So 1 palm of protein, 1 fist of veggies, 1 handful of carbs, and 1 thumb of fats. That's just a general template starting point. Obviously, we then adjust based on the size of the individual, the goals of the individual. Are they doing a 30-minute training session, or are they doing an hour and a half long training session, right? So, and ultimately we would adjust based on results. If you're following the template and not getting the results you want, you kind of adjust up or down. If you need to gain more weight, maybe you add another cupped handful of carbs or a thumb of fats to a few meals. If you need to lose more weight, maybe you remove a cupped handful of carbs or a thumb of fats from a few meals. But that's our general nutrient timing starting point.
Fantastic. And yeah, it's kind of similar to our advice as well. As you say, kind of depending on goals as well. I try and get people to eat kind of their carbohydrates pre-workout mostly, and then kind of on, if their goals are specifically fat loss, then trying to keep breakfast and dinner basically as low carb as possible, and that kind of leads me on to my other questions in terms of what you think about this kind of new wave of low carb athletes coming through, particularly kind of endurance athletes as well. What's the feeling there?
So my feeling is, for especially if you're like a true endurance athlete, it can have its place. It can work for some people. I wrote an article on the PN site about carb consumption in general, because I feel like the low carb approach can work, especially for overweight individuals, absolutely, who have metabolic syndrome or some level of insulin resistance. That makes handling carbohydrates more difficult. But for athletes, especially like mixed sport athletes who play hockey, soccer, basketball, rugby, right, where there's a lot of explosive movement, carbohydrates are imperative. For endurance athletes, it can depend. The research that I've seen, there's certainly some indications that you can become really well fat adapted and do really, really well on a low carb diet as an endurance athlete with a kicker. All the indications I've seen is that even though you do well in like a time to exhaustion test, your ability to sprint is drastically diminished because sprinting is fueled by glucose, right? So if you don't have a good supply of glucose via glycogen, it's much harder to make it via protein or ketones, right? So you see sprinting ability lost. And while sprinting ability isn't necessarily critical in an ultra marathon, oftentimes at the end of a marathon or at the end of longer endurance events, people are racing to the finish line, that final kick. Sure. Right. And so what I've seen, at least in terms of the research, I don't, work with a lot of those type of athletes per se, but that kick ability and sprinting ability is diminished. So it's something to keep in mind. But on the flip side, I'm a results oriented guy. If it's working for you, if your performance is improving, if you're feeling good, then we're going to roll with it, because research is just based on averages, right? You look at any of those studies, and on average, say performance might decrease, but there are going to be some individuals for whom performance increased, right? And some whose performance decreased, and then we kind of just report the averages, but there are always outliers in the study groups. And those outliers exist in the real world too. So people are not always the average, right, of the research. They can be those outliers. So that's always important to keep in mind as a coach, and to understand that research generally discusses the mean, the average, doesn't cover the gamut of each individual. Right.
Which is always the most important point in nutrition is look at your own individual results. If you're getting results from that strategy,
that's what you're doing it for, right?
With it. That's what you're doing, precisely. Right. If it's getting you results, stick with it. If it's not, change things up. That's kind of how it works.
Regardless of what I think or what you read or what your coach told you, or what some other expert told you, if it's working for you in terms of how you look, how you feel, and how you perform, go with it. If it's just helping one and drastically diminishing the others, well, you might want to consider changing it depending on, if your salary depends on it working out that way, that might be one thing. But if it doesn't, then I would consider changing it. But yeah, for the most part, be a results-oriented coach or a results-oriented individual. Absolutely.
Fantastic. And thankfully this year you're going to be coming over to London to speak at FitPro Live at London XL, which I believe is on 9th and 10th of July. Yep. And what are you going to be speaking about there?
I'll be covering a lot of talks, actually. I'll be doing a full talk on nutrient timing, like we're chatting about today. I'll be doing a full talk about, the carbohydrate needs of individuals, how they vary, what you should do as a coach, what you should do as an individual, or where you should look to start, and how you can adjust. I'll be chatting about like the paleo diet, its pros, its cons, its ultimate application. I'll be talking about the cost of getting lean, which is a piece we did back in like November, our most read piece ever, actually, with the whole concept being about knowing what the trade-offs are to get to certain physique
Yeah.
appearances, and understanding them. And if you're okay with them, that's great. If you're not, figure out where you are okay, what trade-offs you are willing to make, and we'll help you get there. But you got to know where you are and where you want to go before you can apply the right steps. Because too often we've seen people apply these really advanced steps and they only want to get to here. Or people who apply too many steps all at once, and all they need to do is to apply some small steps just to make some small changes. And then they can apply more and more as they want to get more progressed. But they try to apply everything that this 6% body fat guy is doing when they're 25 and they want to be 15. Right? You don't have to live that 6% lifestyle just to be 15%. And vice versa, people who have really high expectations for results based on really small changes. And so it's understanding what the process really looks like, what's required to get to where you want to go, and then approaching it with the right tools in hand.
Fantastic. And I'm looking forward to hopefully going to a couple of those talks, because I'm going to be talking there as well, doing a few things on kind of goals and what I call the relatively simple science of slimming. And for the folks that are watching and listening to this, if you want to come along on the 9th, 10th of July, you can buy your tickets on the FitPro website, which is fitpro.com/live, and that'll take you straight through there. And you can look at all the sessions, including Brian's and my own, and all the other fantastic presentations that there's going to be, including kind of workshops and classes and stuff like that. And kind of in terms of the future, Brian, what's going on with Precision Nutrition? Is there any upcoming projects that are going to be blowing us all away again?
Yeah, I think so. We're actually going to be launching our PN coaching in July. But for the first time ever, we're going to be offering like 2 options of coaching. It's going to be a fully coached option, like we've always offered. And there's going to be like what we're calling like a digital workshop coaching option. And so it's essentially like an uncoached version of our coaching program. You get all the lessons, you get all the habits, you get support from your fellow people doing it, but you don't have a coach per se. But I don't remember the exact intervals because I'm not in on the development of this one in particular. But you'll get interactive workshops with Krista Scott-Dixon, who develops the whole curriculum, as well as John Berardi, like the founder of PN. So there'll be opportunities to interact with coaches at PN. It's going to be a totally new experience for us. It's going to be a totally new experience for clients, but just to give people more options in terms of, what's allowable within their budget, right? It'll be a much lower priced option since there won't be a coach full time observing you and holding you accountable and watching your progress. But it's going to be something really cool. We've never done it before, but we're going to be offering it, I believe, starting this July. And so, yeah, that's probably our next big thing. We just launched our level 2 certification in full in March. We had done a beta group back in I think July or something, just to kind of test it out, iron out the kinks and the bugs. We were launching on a whole new platform as well. So we had lots of new going on there. And that's gone really, really well. It's been a phenomenal certification so far. So those are probably the 2 new things we have really going on at PN at the moment. Lots of other stuff in the works. But I can't really comment on them yet because they may or may not come to fruition, right? They're kind of like pilot projects. So
that's it. People can keep up to date with all things PN if they go to your website, which is precisionnutrition.com. And they can also follow you on Twitter at InsidePN. On Facebook, I think it's the same, Inside PN as well. And also for yourself, you're on Twitter at BSP Nutrition, I believe. And then also you've got your own personal blog that gets kind of updated intermittently.
Intermittently, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Brian stpierretraining.com. Is that right?
That's correct.
Fantastic. Super. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Brian. And there's only one thing left to do, and that's to hear a smash it out to all the viewers and listeners out there. So on the count of 3, I want you to shout smash it out to the camera.
You got it.
So 1, 2, 3.
Smash it out.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in July, Brian, and have a safe trip over.
Perfect. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you too.
Fantastic. See you then, mate.
Take care.